So the second objection is related to life. The first one was related to existence. This one has to do with life. If you look at how human beings come to be in this world, you see that it doesn't happen in one step, in one shot. There are a number of premises, a number of things that have to happen, factors, criteria, ingredients, timing. All of it has to happen in a certain way and over time so that that human being becomes a human being. So if a human being, in order to become who they are, requires all these steps and all this time, then how can we accept that suddenly, in one shot, you are telling us in the afterlife, the human being is just gonna come up and they will be already a human being? That's the issue. So here the question, the first one had to do with, how do you accept existence? And the second one, how do you accept life? How can you accept that life happens in one shot when we know that the manner in which life happens, it happens progressively? There are many steps, it happens over time, and it has a lot of ingredients that have to come, all of them together in a certain way at a certain time and over time for it to happen. The first thing that has to do with this objection is that we have to distinguish between a logical impossibility and something that is just very unlikely. If I told you, for instance, I saw a human being flying, that's one statement, and I tell you 1 + 1 = 5, that's another statement. There is a very big difference between rejecting the first one and rejecting the second one. The second statement, 1 + 1 = 5, is a logical impossibility. The first one, I saw a human being flying, it's, well, based on everything we know, a human being shouldn't fly. Is it logically impossible? No, it's not logically impossible. But you have to show me, you have to convince me, because it goes against everything I know about a human being. But maybe someone is doing it. I need to see, I need to know. But it's not a logical impossibility. So to start with the question, because that puts us in a completely different category if what they're claiming is a logical impossibility. Is the objection that for a human being to exist in one shot, is it a logical impossibility? Or is it just highly improbable based on what you know? It's a second. There's no logical impossibility that a human being exists in one shot. Okay, so now we move to the second category. What's the issue? We agree that, based on everything we know, yes, human beings should exist only when all of the ingredients come together and it takes time and there are steps and criteria and conditions and so on and so forth. No issue with that. But even that does not tell us the full story. Because this is relying entirely on the natural order of things. But as we have already seen, there is more than just the natural order of things in this world. And these are the examples of the stories that the Holy Quran has given us. So not to add to the ones we've already seen, just so that we recycle them, some of the stories that we saw, for instance, are the example or the story of the sleepers of the cave. People who sleep for 300 + 9 years, and then they wake up. And then they go back to sleep indefinitely. That's certainly breaking away with the normal natural order of things. Or the story, for instance, of how Prophet Ibrahim a.s. resurrected the birds. Or how Prophet Uzair was put to death for 100 years and then brought back to life to witness how his mule, his donkey, was being brought back to life. Or the story of Bani Israel, the 70 men who went with Prophet Musa a.s., who were put to death, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought them back to life. Or, to give more examples, we didn't want to add too many more, but look at some of the stories of the prophets. Look at their birth. The births, for instance, of the sons of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, who was clearly past the age of giving birth. And his wife was clearly past the age of giving birth. The same thing with Prophet Zakaria alayhi salam, who himself tells Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm too old and my wife is too old. But if you would still give me someone to represent me in my lineage. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him Yahya alayhi salam, John the Baptist. Or, if we continue with the birth of, or the coming into existence of Prophet Adam alayhi salam, or Prophet Isa alayhi salam. So, while we accept that there is a natural order that is, generally speaking, the way in which things happen, there is also and always the power of God and alternatives taking place, some of which we know, many of which we probably don't know. So the Holy Quran gives us these reminders. It gives us these indications that there is more than just the material, natural order of things. And you have to keep that always in mind so that you don't lose sight of the fact that all of this is within the power of God. Right? We've talked about all of this. So if you keep this in mind and you go back to the objection starts looking a lot weaker. That in order to exist, you have to have all the ingredients, and you have to have the time, and you have to have the conditions and the steps, and that's true under normal circumstances. But then Prophet Isa alayhi salam was born without a father. And Prophet Adam alayhi salam was born without a father or a mother. So maybe the conditions are not always 100% what we think they need to be. So this is just to make something that you want to impose on us as an absolute. It's actually relative. Okay, there's a lot more relativity to the question than the way the objection is posed. The second point related to this objection is that you are trying to impose your understanding of the laws of this world on the next world. And inshallah, we're going to go into a lot more detail. We're going to have some lectures where we're going to talk about the characteristics of the next world. But for the time being, all we'll say for now is there's definitely a difference between this dimension, this reality that we call the world, and the afterlife, which clearly has its own laws, its own principles that govern it. And so you can't take things for granted and consider something that you think is a law here, and even that is probably incomplete. Otherwise, all of these miracles would not be happening. You can't take that and impose it on the afterlife. Okay? That's two. The third point related to this objection is that it's clearly, once again, stemming from materialism. You are limiting everything to your materialist understanding of what a human being is, how a human being comes to be, and whether or not, all the ingredients and all the check boxes are there for that body to come back the way it is or the way it was created the first time. When we keep repeating and saying, what really matters is the soul. And the soul has never ceased to exist. And who you truly are is the soul. Now, if you add a body to that soul in the afterlife, that's great. And that's what we claim. And we have many ways of showing that. And inshallah, we'll talk more about this maybe next lecture. We'll talk about the body that may be given to us in the afterlife. But generally speaking, you cannot impose the things you know about this world and a materialist worldview of what you think you know about this world on the afterlife or on the human being. Okay? So that's how we get rid of this second objection. And I think it's clear enough.